What's going on, guys? Joe here. Welcome to my channel. My first video on YouTube is going to be a wealth of knowledge, so tune in. So when I was starting out on my own, I was 99% self-taught. So I was scouring the internet trying to find tips, tricks, systems, efficiencies, etc. on basically finished carpentry, everything to do with finished carpentry. And I struggled a lot with trying to find a system to machine doors. I started for production builders. They sent me a lot of pre-hung doors. And when I got into the custom stuff, I was very intimidated on machining my own door slab from scratch. But it's a way better product. It's shorter lead times because you can just order the slabs. You don't need to order the pre-hungs and all that sort of thing. So I couldn't find a whole lot on YouTube, entire setups on how to machine a door. You know, there's the little hinge jigs that you can buy individually, and you're resetting up 4 times per door. You can chisel it out. You can buy the Trend actually makes, if you want to go easy, Trend makes a door hinge kit, but I like mine. I just make one per style of door. If I've got an 8-foot door with 4 hinges, 4x4s, I have a jig for that. If I have a 6'8" door with 3 hinges, I have a jig for that. 4.5-inch hinges, 3.5, 3-inch hinges, etc. So I have probably 10 jigs that I keep with me for different types of doors, styles, all that stuff. The beauty of making your own jig, like I'm about to show you, is between this one or the Trend. With this one, you're not puncturing the door. So the Trend, you actually need to put big nail holes into the door to keep it in place. With mine, you only need to clamp it, leave your painter much happier, and especially if you have a stained grade door, you're not puncturing the stained grade door, because that you'll always see. A good painter can fill a paint grade nail hole, but if he doesn't have to, why should he? So I'll give you a rundown on everything. I'll give you a rundown on my setup, my tools, my jig, obviously, the door, all that sort of thing. So let's get into it. So let's go over the door first. These are solid 1 3/4 by 8-foot doors that I'm working with here. And you want to determine if they're beveled. Not sure if you can see that, but a swing door should have a 3-degree factory bevel on it. And if it doesn't, you're going to want to put it on to save yourself a huge headache on the installation. So this is about a 120, 130 pound door, and we're using solid brass 4x4 ball bearing hinges, 4 of them to be exact. And I'm going 7-7 with these, meaning 7 down from the top, 7 in from the end to keep it easy. And that's how I made my jig. So the jig is all made of scrap wood. I keep it, I reuse it. I've got my jam marked here, so I use this also to route out my jams. When I'm routing the jam, I put the jam flush with the end. I have a line 7/8 over for the door, and then 7 1/16 to the outside of my cutout here on the jig. Same with the bottom, because it's reversible. So you set your outside and your outside 7 1/16 in from the door mark, and the 1/16 will make sense very soon. And then these two hinges, these two templates have to be perfectly centered and with the rest of it. So I believe I have 21 and 27/30 seconds or just under 7/8 in between them all. And that is very important because once you route the door, your jamb is opposite, you flip it over, route your jamb, and if you're a 30-second off with the distances, by the time you flip it, you're a 16th off, and when you go to mount your door, you're gonna have problems. Your hinges aren't going to fall in their mortises. So they're 4x4 hinges. So I would cut this. I use a miter saw to cut this part and a table saw to cut the rip. This is 4 1/8 if you have a 4-inch hinge. So you want to go 1/8 bigger. And the distance here, I like to keep 1/8 to 1/4 inch from the back side of the door. You don't want it to blow out. It kind of depends on the size of your hinges and the thickness of your door. So let's get into why we oversize it by 1/8 of an inch. So a 16th on either side. And that also makes sense with the 7 1/16. And that has to do with our router setup here. So this is my router of choice. Absolutely love this plunge base DeWalt router. I use a 1/2 inch hinge mortising bit and a 5/8 outside diameter guide. So you have 1/16 of an inch from the outside of your bit to the outside of your guide. So that's where your 1/16 comes into play on both sides. So it gives you 1/8 side to side. Because your door is on a 3-degree bevel, when I cut this stretcher, it's also cut at a 3-degree bevel. So it's just gonna hug the door so nicely and allow you to get a nice flat surface to put your router on. I've got my jig all clamped up onto the door here. My phone is having a hard time focusing, it seems, but bear with it. So now we're ready to route. Before we do that, we want to establish the route depth. So there's a really easy way to do this with the plunge router. I'll show you here. So grab your plunge router. It doesn't have to be plunge based, but this makes it a lot easier. And with your template flat on the door, your router flat on the template, you're gonna go ahead, drop your router till your bit touches the door. Now with your bit on the door, you're gonna loosen up your stopper here, lift it up and out of the way, take your hinge, and just put it underneath your stopper, put some pressure on the stopper down, and tighten this up. Lift your router back up, take the hinge out, and that distance is the thickness of my hinge. And when I drop the router, it's gonna make a perfect depth so my hinge is flush with the door, and that's really important. So there we have it routed out. We have a 1/4 inch radius on the outside of the hinge. A lot of hinges come with a 1/4 inch radiuses. Mine are square. It's personal preference, really. Do that 4 times and we're ready for the next step. Now that our hinges are all routed out, I've done all 4. I took off the jig. Now we're just gonna square up these corners here. I've got this little tool made by Templaco. Trend also makes one. And it's basically a corner chisel. So I hold it firmly on the corner of that mortise, and a little tap with a mallet. There you have it, a friction fit, perfect mortise that won't fall out on its own. Perfectly tight. Now that we've got the hinges in place, we need to pre-drill these before we put a screw in it. We don't want to crack our door, split it. So I have here a self-centering drill bit. And that gives you perfectly centered holes every time. We'll go ahead and do this 4 times and our door is done. And then we'll do the same thing on the jamb. Only difference is we'll offset the jamb by 7/8 of an inch. I probably didn't specify before, but that 7/8 is determined by the thickness of your jamb and your reveal. In this case, we have a 3/4 jamb and a 1/8 reveal. We've got all hinges on our doors. Now I'm going to take it up out of the way, bring it to its opening, and repeat the process on the jamb. I've got my jamb here laid out on the workbench. So with it being a right-hand door, I'm going to want to route this side of the jamb. So I'll just mark my top with a T. This time around, we're going to clamp it flush and repeat the process. Now, if you remember, I've got a 3-degree bevel on the jig, but our saving grace is that most jambs do come actually with a 3-degree bevel. So there's no separate jig, there's no modifications needed. It fits your door and it fits your jamb. There we have our jamb all ready to go. Now I've just got to cut the other leg and the header. This is a 32-inch door. You're going to want to cut your header 32 3/16 to give you a 1/16 on your hinge side and a 1/8 reveal on your swing side. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you found some help, some knowledge, some efficiency Now, you don't need everything I have here. You don't need a plunge-based router. You can do with a standard trim router. You don't need this guide bushing. You can do it with the bearing. I prefer not to use a bearing because it gives you the ability to plunge and mess up your jig and you're making new jigs. So this is kind of a bulletproof way to keep your jigs in good condition. You don't need this corner punch. Again, you can do it with the chisel, but for me, I'm doing this for a living. I'm doing this in a production setting. If you can find a way to shave off 2 seconds per task, you do that 100 times on a project, you're saving time and you're making more money. So hopefully you guys have found what you were looking for in this video. If you have, please subscribe. It's a new channel. I've got more videos coming, hardware installation, door installation, finished carpentry, casing, baseboard coping, carpet sealing, all that sort of thing. So please subscribe, it helps keep the channel going, and we'll see you in the next one.